I'd like to begin talking to the parents today. I'd like to begin talking to the parents and identifying what I believe is one of the major issues that students have who struggle with math. And that is, I believe, in my opinion and my experience, students struggle with their timetables. If you're a parent watching today, this is a message to the parents. Normally we're talking to students. But if you're a parent out there, what I'd like you to do is tonight, I want you to, when I work with my students, I ask them, what's your name? They tell me their first name. And then I ask them, what's their middle name? And then they tell me their middle name. I ask them, what's their last name? And then they tell me their last name. And they respond immediately with an answer. And if I ask them enough times, they almost get almost frustrated. And there's a certainty at which they answer the question. And I believe that our students should be able to perform and be able to recite their timetables with the same immediate response. And one of the things that I challenge parents to do tonight is your child won't be expecting this, but ask them what their middle name is, and then they'll tell you, and see the speed at which they respond to that question. And then after that, ask them a timetable. What's 6 times 8? They should respond to 6 times 8 just as quick, they should be just as certain as to what 6 times 8 is as they are their middle name. This is what I teach my students. And if they're not certain, this is one of the areas where I would like us to begin as adults. I'd like us to begin drilling our children and challenging our children to learn and master their timetables. This, in my opinion, is one of the number one areas where our children need to work. It's the foundation of most of math is founded in understanding the timetables. And if there's a gap, if there's misunderstanding in any area, math will be very difficult for them. So I just wanted to begin with that. 4/5 minus 1/3 plus 1/2. Let's attempt to solve this problem in more than one way. We've got 4/5 minus 1/3 plus 1/2. Okay, what we are not going to do, again, we are not just going to multiply these numbers out. What I'd like you to do is begin with the larger of these three, what we call denominators, and ask yourself, can 3 go into 5? You want both the 2 and the 3 to be able to divide into the least common denominator. So, can 3 divide into 5 evenly? Hopefully you see that it can't. And then what we said was we would increment the 5. You go from 5 to 10. Can 3 divide into 10 evenly? And it can't. Well, then you ask yourself, can 3 divide into 15 evenly? And it can. However, this 2 here, this 2 cannot divide into the 15 evenly. So you continue to increment the 5 to 20. Can 3 divide into 20? It can't. Can 3 divide into 25? It can't. Can 3 divide into 30? And you notice that it can. And also, you also notice that 2 can divide into 30. And what that means is that 30 is our least common denominator. We did not just multiply those denominators out to get 30. Even though for this particular problem, if you multiply the denominators, you will get 30. But I don't want us to use that approach because it won't give us the least common denominator. Our goal is not to get any common denominator, but a smallest common denominator. Let's take a look at this problem. We have to multiply the 2 by 15 to get that 30. So we have to multiply the 1 by 15 to get 15. We have to multiply this 3 by 10 to get this 30. So therefore we have to multiply that 1 by 10 and we find that we get 30. Oh, excuse me, we find that we get 10. Be careful with your arithmetic. Be careful with your arithmetic. All right, so let's multiply this 5 by 6 to get 30, and let's multiply this 4 by the same 6 to get 24. All right, so now that we have a common denominator, we have 24 minus 10, which is 14, and that 14 plus the 15, you end up with 29 over 30. Final answer. 29 over 30. All right, so if you have some ingredients that you're making, you need to understand fractions. If you've got 4/5 cup of something, you have 1/3 cup, you take out 1/3 cups of something, and then you add a half a cup of something. What's the amount of ingredients that you will have in that container? Well, you need fractions to determine that. And that's what we're showing you how to operate with fractions to analyze and be able to perform some very practical applications. I want you to call in, but if you don't call in right now, we're going to look at this same problem using a different technique. My philosophy is that you can solve the same problem in more than one way. You have a mastery level understanding of problems. Let's look at this same problem using a different technique. We have 4/5 minus 1/3 plus 1/2. Let's fix this problem. Let's write this problem in a way where it's horizontal, as opposed to this approach where we wrote the problem, it was more of a vertical approach. What we're going to do is multiply this equation by 1. Anytime you multiply something by 1, you get the same number. If you multiply 2 by 1, you get 2. If you multiply 6 by 1, you'll get 6. You'll always be left with the same number. In other words, you do not change the original number when you multiply by 1. Now, another way to say 1 is 3 over 3, or 4 over 4, or 9 over 9. Each of those fractions are equivalent to 1. Let's use that understanding to approach this problem here using a different technique. If you multiply these fractions by 1, 1 being the common denominator, the least common denominator of 30 over 30, 30 over 30 is the same thing as 1. 30 over 30 is the same thing as 1. So let's multiply this 4/5. Let's do it right up here. Let's multiply 4/5. Let's multiply 4/5 times 30. If you multiply 4/5 times 30, this 5, you can divide 5 into each of those numbers. If you divide 5, that's a 1, that's a 6. So you're left with 24. You multiplied 30 times 4/5, and you're left with 24. Now let's multiply that 30 times the 1/3. Let's do that up here. We have 1/3 times 30, and you're left with the 3 and the 30 are divisible. You can divide that 3 by 1. You can divide this 30 by 3, and you're left with 10, and you're left with 1 times 10, which is 10. You're left with minus 10. And now let's multiply this 30 times a half. Let's do that up here. We have a half times 30, and the 2 is divisible with the 30. You're left with 15, and you're left with 1 times 15, and you have 15, and that's divided by 30. And now you have the same 24 minus 10 plus 15. That's 14 plus 15 over 30, and you're left with the same 29/30. Same answer.